I should have known better than to take this goddamn case. But when Sheriff Gunderson called me up last month, practically begging for help, I couldn't say no. Not after what happened last time. So I packed up my meager belongings, threw them in the trunk of my beat-up Chevy, and made the long drive up to Redwood Falls. As I cruised down Main Street, past boarded-up storefronts and weather-beaten houses, I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the damp fog rolling in off the Pacific. This town was dying, slowly but surely, like so many others I'd seen. The kind of place where hope comes to shrivel up and rot. I pulled into the gravel lot of the Redwood Inn, a sagging two-story motel that had seen better days. The neon vacancy sign flickered weakly in the gray afternoon light. Christ, what I wouldn't give for a drink right about now. But I'd been sober for 8 months, 3 days, and I checked my watch. 16 hours, one day at a time, right? The motel clerk barely looked up from her dog-eared romance novel as I approached the front desk. Her eyes were sunken, skin sallow. "Room for one," I grunted, sliding over my credit card. "Passing through?" she asked in a bored monotone. I shook my head. "Here on business. Not sure how long." She raised an eyebrow at that, a spark of curiosity briefly lighting her dull eyes. "You're him, aren't you? The detective the sheriff called in about the incidents?" I nodded curtly, not in the mood for small talk. She handed over a key attached to a tacky plastic keychain shaped like a redwood tree. "Room 13. Watch yourself out there. Strange things in these woods." I lugged my duffel bag up the creaky stairs, wincing at the musty smell that permeated the hallway. Room 13 was about what I expected. Faded floral wallpaper, lumpy mattress, ancient TV that probably only got 3 channels on a good day. I tossed my bag on the bed and fished out the case file Gunderson had sent over. Time to see what I was dealing with. The first report came in about 2 months ago. A couple of hikers spotted what they described as a giant, hair-covered creature near Coyote Creek. They managed to snap a blurry photo that could have been Bigfoot, or a bear, or some joker in a costume. Pretty standard stuff. But then the sightings kept coming. A group of campers heard strange howls in the night and found their cooler torn to shreds. Massive, unidentifiable footprints appeared in people's backyards. Pets started going missing. And then they found the bodies. The first was a logger named Bill Haskins. What was left of him, anyway. The official report said animal attack, but the photos told a different story. No bear or mountain lion could do that kind of damage. The body had been torn limb from limb, organs missing, skull crushed like an eggshell. 2 more deaths followed in quick succession. Sarah Chen, a grad student doing research on owl populations. Marcus Whitaker, a retiree who liked to fish up at Lake Redemption. Both found in similar condition to Haskins. Gunderson was out of his depth, and the locals were in a panic. That's where I came in. I sighed, rubbing my temples. This was going to be a long night. I needed coffee, and lots of it. The diner across the street was nearly empty when I walked in, just a couple of old-timers nursing cups of coffee at the counter. A bell jingled as I pushed open the door, and the waitress looked up from wiping down a table. She was young, maybe early 20s, with tired eyes that spoke of too many long shifts and not enough sleep. "Sit anywhere you like," she said, gesturing vaguely at the empty booths. I slid into one near the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded street. The waitress ambled over, notepad in hand. Her name tag read Jenny. "What can I get you?" she asked, stifling a yawn. "Coffee black. And keep it coming." She nodded and shuffled off. I turned my attention back to the case file, spreading the photos across the sticky tabletop. The images were gruesome, to say the least. I'd seen my share of violent crime scenes over the years, but this was something else entirely. The victims hadn't just been killed, they'd been savaged, torn apart with inhuman strength and ferocity. Jenny returned with my coffee, eyes widening as she caught sight of the photos. "Oh God," she whispered, going pale. "Is that?" I quickly gathered up the pictures, stuffing them back in the folder. "Sorry about that. Police business." She set down my mug with trembling hands. "You're here about the killings, aren't you? The thing in the woods?" I nodded, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. "What can you tell me about it?" Jenny glanced around nervously, then slid into the booth across from me. "I saw it," she said in a hushed voice. "About a week ago when I was driving home late after my shift. It was just standing there at the edge of the trees, watching me. Must have been 8, 9 feet tall. And its eyes," she shuddered. "They glowed red in my headlights, like something out of a nightmare." I leaned forward, intrigued. "Did you report this to the sheriff?" She shook her head. "What's the point? Nobody believes us anyway. They think we're all going crazy or something." Jenny's voice dropped even lower. "But that's not the worst part. Sometimes at night, I hear it calling. It sounds just like my little brother Tommy. But Tommy's been dead for 5 years." A chill ran down my spine. "It mimics human voices?" Jenny nodded, eyes wide with fear. "Please, you have to do something. Before anyone else dies." I reached across the table, patting her hand awkwardly. Comfort was never my strong suit. "I'll do what I can. Thank you for telling me." As I paid my bill and headed back out into the gloomy evening, my mind was racing. If even half of what Jenny said was true, we were dealing with something far more dangerous than a rogue bear or deranged killer. Something that shouldn't exist. The rational part of my brain rebelled against the idea. There had to be a logical explanation. But after everything I'd seen in my years on the force, I'd learned that reality is often stranger and more terrifying than we'd like to believe. I spent the next few days interviewing witnesses, combing through evidence, and trudging through miles of dense, shadowy forest. The more I dug, the more unsettling the picture became. This wasn't just a series of random animal attacks. There was a pattern, a frightening intelligence behind the killings. And always, that nagging sense of being watched. Malevolent eyes boring into me from just beyond the tree line. On the 4th night, I jolted awake in my dingy motel room, heart pounding. Something had woken me, a sound just on the edge of hearing. I lay still, straining my ears. There it was again. A voice calling from somewhere in the darkness outside. "Jack, help me, Jack." I froze, ice flooding my veins. That voice. I knew that voice. It was Sarah, my partner, the one I'd failed to save all those years ago. But that was impossible. Sarah was dead, her body found in a ditch outside Chicago, victim of the serial killer we'd been hunting. The case that had broken me, sent me spiraling into the bottle and out of the force. "Jack, please, I'm scared." The voice was closer now, just outside my window. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, that this was a trap. But some primal part of my brain had taken over, driven by guilt and a desperate, irrational hope. Before I knew what I was doing, I was out of bed, fumbling for my gun and flashlight. I threw open the door and stumbled out into the fog-shrouded parking lot, heart hammering in my chest. "Sarah," I called, my voice hoarse. "Where are you?" A rustle of movement caught my attention. A shadowy figure stood at the edge of the woods across the street, half hidden by the trees. It was roughly human-shaped, but far too tall, too broad. "Jack," the voice came again, but this time it was different. Distorted, as if multiple voices were layered on top of each other. "Come to me, Jack." I raised my gun with trembling hands, flicking on the flashlight. The beam cut through the mist, illuminating the thing that stood watching me. "Oh, Jesus. Oh, sweet Jesus, no." It was massive, at least 9 feet tall, covered in matted brown fur. But that wasn't the worst part. Its face, dear God, its face. It was like someone had tried to mold human features out of clay, but given up halfway through. The proportions were all wrong, grotesque parodies of eyes and mouth stretched across misshapen bone. And its eyes, they glowed a hellish red in the beam of my flashlight, filled with a terrible intelligence. I stumbled backward, nearly falling as my legs threatened to give out. The creature took a step forward, its massive frame moving with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible. "What's wrong, Jack?" it said, and now the voice was a twisted mixture of Sarah's and something infinitely older, colder. "Don't you want to see your old partner again?" A scream built in my throat as the thing lunged forward with impossible speed. I turned and ran, blind panic driving me into the woods. Branches whipped at my face as I crashed through the underbrush, the sound of heavy footfalls close behind. I ran until my lungs burned, until spots danced in front of my eyes. But no matter how fast I moved, I could hear it right behind me, toying with me, letting me think I might escape, only to dash that hope with another inhuman roar. Finally, my foot caught on a root and I went down hard, tumbling down a steep embankment. I came to a stop at the bottom, dazed and bleeding. As I struggled to my feet, I realized with horror where I was. The old redwood mine, abandoned decades ago after a cave-in killed a dozen workers. Locals said it was haunted. Right now, that seemed like the least of my worries. I could hear the creature crashing through the trees above. With no other choice, I stumbled into the yawning black maw of the mine entrance. The darkness swallowed me whole as I moved deeper into the tunnels, using my flashlight sparingly to conserve the batteries. The air grew thick and stale, heavy with the scent of decay. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, the sound echoing off the rock walls. I don't know how long I wandered those twisting passages, jumping at every shadow, every skitter of unseen things in the dark. Hours, maybe. My sense of time had become as warped as these tunnels. And then I heard it. That awful, multi-layered voice, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Did you really think you could hide from me, Jack? I've been waiting so long for you to come. We have so much to talk about." I whirled around, gun raised, but there was nothing there. Just more darkness, more twisting tunnels. "Why me?" I croaked, my voice raw with fear and exhaustion. "What do you want?" A low chuckle reverberated through the mine, sending loose pebbles skittering across the ground. "Oh, Jack, sweet, broken Jack, I want what I've always wanted, to feed, to grow stronger, and you, my friend, are going to help me do that." The voice was closer now, coming from just around the next bend. I steeled myself, knowing I was out of options. It was time to face this thing, whatever it was. I rounded the corner, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, and there it stood, blocking the tunnel ahead. In the confined space of the mine, it seemed even larger, more monstrous, those glowing red eyes fixed on me with predatory intensity. "What are you?" I whispered, finger tightening on the trigger of my gun. The creature's misshapen mouth twisted into something like a smile. "I am hunger. I am the thing that lurks in the shadows of your nightmares. I am as old as these woods, and I will be here long after your kind is turned to dust." It took a step forward, and I emptied my clip into its massive chest. The gunshots were deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullets might as well have been mosquito bites for all the good they did. The thing didn't even flinch. My turn. It growled and lunged. I dove to the side, feeling the rush of air as massive claws barely missed my head. I scrambled to my feet and ran deeper into the mine, heart pounding in my ears. The creature's roar of frustration echoed off the walls, spurring me to run faster. I careened through the tunnels, taking random turns, praying I'd find another way out. But with each passing minute, a sickening realization grew in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't escaping. I was being herded. Finally, I burst into a large cavern and skidded to a halt. Moonlight filtered in through a hole in the ceiling far above, illuminating a nightmarish scene. The floor was littered with bones, human and animal alike. And hanging from crude hooks embedded in the rock walls were fresh corpses in various states of dismemberment. I retched, the stench of death overwhelming me. As I straightened up, wiping my mouth, I saw it. The creature stood blocking the only exit, its massive form silhouetted against the tunnel behind it. "Welcome home, Jack," it said, spreading its arms wide. "Do you like what I've done with the place?" I backed away, my eyes darting around for any possible weapon or escape route. There was nothing. I was trapped. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, playing for time. "Why this town? These people?" The creature tilted its head, regarding me with something like amusement. "Why does a wolf hunt deer? I must feed. And the fear, oh, the delicious fear that radiates from this town, it makes the meat so much sweeter." It took a step closer, and I could see strings of saliva dripping from its twisted maw. "But you, Jack, you're special. I've been watching you for a long time. All that guilt, that self-loathing, it's intoxicating." My back hit the cavern wall. There was nowhere left to run. You've been in my head, my dreams?" The creature nodded, a low chuckle rumbling from its chest. "Oh yes, I've tasted your nightmares, Jack, savored the memory of your dead partner, and now I'll feast on your flesh and absorb all that delicious pain." It lunged forward with terrifying speed. I ducked and rolled, feeling the wind of its massive claws passing inches from my head. I came up in a crouch, desperately searching for anything I could use as a weapon. My hand closed around a jagged piece of rock, and I swung it with all my might as the creature charged again. The improvised weapon connected with its misshapen head with a sickening crunch. The thing staggered back, howling in pain and rage. For a moment, hope flared in my chest. But then I saw the wound on its head already beginning to close, the bone knitting back together before my eyes. "Oh, Jack," it snarled, eyes blazing with fury. "I was going to make this quick, but now I'm going to take my time. I'm going to make you suffer in ways you can't even imagine." It moved faster than should have been possible for something so large. Before I could react, I was pinned against the wall, massive claws digging into my shoulders. The stench of its breath washed over me as its face loomed close. "Your fear is exquisite," it growled. "But do you know what's even better? Hope. That last, desperate spark of hope before I snuff it out forever." Its jaws gaped wide, rows of razor-sharp teeth gleaming in the dim light. This was it. This was how I died, torn apart in a monster's lair. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But then I heard it. A rumble, deep and ominous, coming from somewhere above. The creature paused, cocking its head to listen. The rumble grew louder, accompanied by the sound of shifting rock. The realization hit me like a freight train. The gunshots earlier. The unstable mind. We'd triggered a cave-in. I locked eyes with the creature, seeing my own dawning horror reflected in its glowing red orbs. For a moment we were frozen in a bizarre tableau, predator and prey united in the face of impending doom. Then the world exploded into chaos. The cavern ceiling came crashing down in a thunderous avalanche of rock and timber. I threw myself to the side, narrowly avoiding being crushed by a massive boulder. Dust filled the air, choking me as I scrambled blindly through the maelstrom. The creature's roar of rage was cut short by the sound of something heavy impacting flesh and bone. I caught a glimpse of its massive form disappearing under a pile of debris, before my vision was obscured by billowing clouds of dust. I crawled on my hands and knees, gasping for air, feeling my way along the cavern wall. My hand found an opening, a small tunnel, barely big enough for me to squeeze through. With no other options, I pulled myself into the cramped space, just as another section of the ceiling collapsed behind me. I don't know how long I inched my way through that claustrophobic passage. Minutes or hours, time lost all meaning in the pitch darkness. My world narrowed to the scrape of rock against my skin, the burn in my lungs as I fought for each breath. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, that I'd die in this lightless tomb, I felt a whisper of fresh air on my face. With renewed desperation, I clawed my way forward until suddenly, blessedly, I was out. I emerged on a forested hillside, gulping in great lungfuls of clean night air. The moon hung low and swollen in the sky, bathing the landscape in ethereal silver light. I wanted to weep with relief. But as the adrenaline faded, the reality of my situation set in. I was miles from town, injured, with no idea which direction to go, and I couldn't shake the gnawing fear that the creature might have survived, that it was even now clawing its way out of the rubble to resume the hunt. I forced myself to my feet, wincing at the pain that lanced through my battered body. One step at a time. That's all I could do. One foot in front of the other, until I found help or collapsed trying. As I limped through the moonlit forest, I couldn't help but wonder, had I truly escaped? Or had the creature allowed me to live, knowing the fear and paranoia would slowly consume me? I glanced back at the dark woods behind me, half expecting to see glowing red eyes watching from the shadows. There was nothing there. But that didn't mean I was safe. I had the sinking feeling that this nightmare was far from over. After all, you can't kill fear. And in the deepest, darkest part of my soul, I knew the truth. The real monster was still out there waiting. And someday, somehow, it would find me again,